Everyone tells you real estate is a great investment. Everyone also tells you the stock market is a great investment. Nobody tells you what actually happens when you put the same $20,000 into both. Side by side, real numbers. No hand waving. So let's find out. Same starting point. Julian and Olivia. Same $60,000 salary, same city, same year, same $20,000 saved. Julian buys a small rental property, an $80,000 duplex in an affordable market, puts $20,000 down, 25%, takes a 30-year investment property mortgage at 7%. Investment loans usually run a bit higher than the rate on a home you live in. Principal and interest, about $399 a month.
Olivia takes her $20,000 and puts it straight into an index fund, averaging 7% a year, the long-run historical average for the S&P 500. That's the whole setup. Julian is now a landlord. Olivia just clicked a button.
What Julian's property actually earns. Here's where people usually get the math wrong on rental property. They only think about appreciation and forget the property is also generating income every single month. Julian's duplex rents for about $800 a month combined, using a common rule of thumb real estate investors call the 1% rule, where monthly rent equals roughly 1% of the purchase price. Out of that $800, expenses eat a big chunk. Property taxes, insurance, maintenance costs, and a bit set aside for repairs. Using a standard 50% rule estimate, about $400 a month goes to expenses, leaving $400 to cover the mortgage.
The mortgage payment is $399. So in year one, Julian is almost exactly breaking even, making about $12 a year in actual cash flow. Not exciting. In fact, if you stop the story here, you'd think Julian made a pointless decision. Why take on a mortgage, a tenant, and a leaking faucet at midnight just to break even? Meanwhile, Olivia's side looks completely boring, in a good way. Olivia doesn't do anything. No tenants, no repairs, no 2 a.m. phone calls. Her $20,000 just sits in an index fund, quietly compounding.
By year one, it's worth about $21,400. By year 5, about $28,050. By year 10, about $39,340. Steady, predictable, boring growth. Exactly what you'd expect from an unleveraged investment. Think of it like a slow cooker versus a stovetop. Olivia's money is the slow cooker. Set it, forget it, check back later. Julian's property is the stovetop. It needs attention, it can boil over, but it's also capable of producing something bigger, faster, if you tend to it right.
The two things nobody accounts for: rising rent and growing equity. Here's what changes the picture entirely over time, and it's the same mechanism we saw with renting versus buying. Leverage, plus two forces compounding quietly in the background. First, rent tends to rise, roughly 3% a year on average, the same way any price creeps up over time. Julian's mortgage payment, though, stays completely fixed at $399 a month for all 30 years. So every year, the gap between what tenants pay and what Julian owes the bank gets a little wider. By year 10, rent has grown to about $1,075 a month. Expenses grow too, but the fixed mortgage means Julian's monthly cash flow keeps climbing, from break even in year 1 to roughly $150 a month in profit by year 10.
Second, every mortgage payment slowly pays down the loan, building equity, and the property itself is appreciating at the same time. By year 10, Julian's $80,000 duplex, appreciating at 3.5% a year, is worth about $112,800. The mortgage balance has dropped to around $63,300. That's about $49,500 in equity just from paying down a loan and letting time pass. Year 10. Checking the scoreboard. By year 10, here's where things stand. Olivia's index fund, about $39,340. Julian's property, $49,500 in equity, plus roughly $6,800 in cumulative cash flow collected along the way. Small in the early years, growing each year after. Total, around $56,300. Subtract the roughly 6% selling costs if Julian wanted to cash out, agent fees, closing costs, and Julian's net position is about $52,900. Julian is already ahead by about $13,500, and the gap is about to grow a lot faster because both of Julian's advantages, rising cash flow and compounding appreciation, keep accelerating in the same direction. Year 20, the full picture. By year 20, Julian's duplex, appreciating the whole time at 3.5% a year, is worth roughly $159,100. The mortgage balance has shrunk to about $34,400. That's $124,700 in equity. Add in cumulative rental cash flow over the full 20 years, which grows from nearly nothing in year 1 to a healthy monthly profit by the end. Roughly $33,200 collected along the way. Total before selling, about $157,900. After the typical 6% in selling costs, roughly $148,000 net. Olivia's index fund, after 20 years of compounding at 7% with no additional contributions, roughly $77,400. The gap, about $70,600 in Julian's favor. Why the gap is so large? The same mechanism, again. This is leverage, doing exactly what it did in the renting versus buying comparison, just with a rental property instead of a primary home. Julian only ever put in $20,000, but that $20,000 controls an $80,000 asset. Every dollar of appreciation applies to the full $80,000, not just the $20,000 down payment. And on top of that, unlike a primary residence, Julian's property generates monthly income the entire time, income that grows every year while the mortgage payment stays frozen.
Olivia's $20,000, meanwhile, only ever grows based on what she actually put in. No borrowed money, no rental income, no leverage, just steady, honest compounding. It's the same story as before. Leverage on an appreciating, income-producing asset compounds faster than unleveraged growth, given enough time.
The honest caveats. This is where a lot of real estate content stops being honest, so let's not do that. This math assumes Julian's property actually hits that 1% rent-to-price rule. Plenty of markets, especially expensive coastal cities, don't come close to that ratio, which would make the numbers far less favorable or even negative. It doesn't account for income tax on rental profit, or capital gains and depreciation recapture taxes when Julian eventually sells. Both would shrink that final number. It also doesn't account for a bad tenant, a costly eviction, a major unexpected repair like a new roof or foundation issue, or months of vacancy between tenants, any of which can wipe out years of cash flow in one hit.
And it completely leaves out Julian's time. Managing a rental property, even a good one, takes actual hours. Screening tenants, coordinating repairs, handling late-night emergency calls. Olivia's $77,400 required 0 hours of her time. That's not nothing.
The real takeaway. Julian didn't win because real estate is automatically a better investment than the stock market. Plenty of real estate deals lose money, and plenty of index fund investors build serious wealth doing nothing at all. Julian won because this specific property in this specific market let a relatively small amount of cash control a much larger, income-producing, appreciating asset.
Olivia didn't lose. She built a completely passive $77,400 with 0 risk of a bad tenant, 0 maintenance calls, and total liquidity if she ever needed the cash immediately. The real question isn't which investment is better. It's whether you're willing to trade Olivia's simplicity and liquidity for Julian's higher potential return, and whether the specific deal in front of you actually has the numbers to back it up, the way this one did. Run the real numbers on your own deal before you buy, because a bad rental property bought without checking the math can lose to an index fund every single time.